Canada ought to lead. When questioned, will Canada lead on issues relating to Ukraine to truly make a difference on files like lethal defensive weapons, sectoral sanctions that would be catastrophic? Mr. Harper's fallback position is, well, I have to wait for our allies, we have to wait for the Americans. How many dead Ukrainians does it take to see Western governments show leadership? And the same question can be put to Mr. Harper. Last week, Matthew Fisher, an investigative journalist for the National Post, did an article where he compared the foreign policy positions of the three major parties. The Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, and the NDP. And one of the top issues was Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. And his analysis showed there's zero difference between the two positions. If you take a look at his article, his finding is there is no difference between the Conservative and Liberal Party when it comes to policies with Ukraine. There is a difference with the NDP, and a significant difference. But why is there a perception that there's a difference? For two reasons. Number one, Prime Minister Harper is the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister of a country, the President of a country, is the spokesperson on geopolitical issues. And everyone listens to a Prime Minister when they speak to these issues, and especially so when the Prime Minister gets on his jet and flies to Ukraine. That doesn't happen with a third-party leader. So, reality, there is no difference in positions. In fact, I would say the journalist Fisher was slightly incorrect in his findings, because Justin has called for Russia to be removed from SWIFT, which the Prime Minister has not. So he's actually gone further. And in question period, over and over, people like Chrystia Freeland has raised the issue of conservative exemptions provided to Russian oligarchs with ties to lobbyists, Canadian lobbyists. In one case, someone that used to work in former Foreign Minister John Baird's office, and ties to a couple of large Canadian corporations with joint ventures with Russian companies that have been sanctioned by Europeans and the Americans.
Canada's Conservative government announced what seemed to be very tough sanctions against Russian individuals and institutions and corporations, tougher than some other countries on paper, and then quietly backed off them to a huge degree and didn't institute them to a major degree, but because an exemption was put in place saying we're going to withdraw sanctions that could affect Canadian companies that have business interests, notably petroleum companies. And suddenly what was tough sanctions became very mild sanctions.
Sanctions are meant to hurt. And if you then say, we'll put in place sanctions, but we'll exempt those companies where it might hurt, it defeats the whole purpose. So that's number one. There is no difference in positions. In fact, the Liberal position is stronger in two instances. Last night, I was at an awards ceremony at the Royal York Hotel, organized by Canada's Jewish community. It was called Words and Deeds. I want to see Canadian leadership. I want to see more deeds as opposed to rhetoric. At this point in time, at this juncture, Ukraine's actual existence as a state has never been in greater jeopardy. So this is the time when we have to be very strategic in our voting.